Welcome to Kilroy's Outlaws and Legends Behind the Music with your host, multi-award-winning music producer, Eddie Kilroy. And now, here's your host, Eddie Kilroy.
Hey, how are you? I hope you're as good as I am. I feel good today. Welcome to another edition of Kilroy's Outlaws, Legends, and Behind the Music. We're going behind the music again today. And that's what this is designed about, is to share some stories with you, some experiences that I had in my nearly 4 decades in the music industry in Nashville, being a record producer, being a songwriter, being a manager of some artists, running some rather large labels. I got to see a whole lot up there. Some of it disturbing, some of it you take with a grain of thought, part of the industry. The one thing that I thought about the other day, how many times have I heard in my life, and you've heard too, I'm sure, and you've also possibly thought that, hey, there's somebody on the radio singing, but I know somebody that sings better than that. Well, I've got a brother-in-law. He can really sing good, sings better than that guy on the radio. Or somebody might say, yeah, I was over at my neighbor's house and he had a guitar and he was singing. He sounds better than those people on the radio that I hear on records. Why aren't they on records? Well, there's a million reasons. Not really a million, but a handful. I'm going to share them with you, and this comes from my experience in Music City, USA, which I tell you, I wouldn't take $1 million for the memories. I wouldn't take $1 million for the experience and the opportunity. And I've shared that with several of my old friends that are still with us, that were there when I was there, and they will tell you the same thing. I always felt that in Nashville, and I'm going back a ways, but I'm sure it still exists today because some things never change. There would be, I thought, more people on the street. On the street meaning 16th Avenue, 17th Avenue. We referred to them as being on the street, all right? They were aspiring writers. They were aspiring artists. They were just wanted to do something in the business. And they had to sometimes struggle to get to Nashville, to get fair. Going back to that old story from the 50s when Jerry Lee Lewis's daddy sold eggs to get enough gasoline to go to Memphis to audition for Sun Records in San Phillips. Well, same applies to people trying to get to Nashville, except in a different way. And I would see them come in one side of Nashville, and they would just roll out the other side. You know why? And I preached this to a lot of them that I had the opportunity. If you had the talent and you believed in yourself and you feel like you can't stay and knock on doors anymore, stay one more day. Stay one more week. Stay till you make it, because if you got the talent, you'll make it. But getting back to what I originally said, why do you hear people on the radio, people on labels, that you think you know people or have heard people in a club or a concert or whatever that sounds better than the ones on the radio? Well, I'll give you a few examples why. The record companies, to say yes, say an artist comes to them, or the artist perhaps is lucky enough to have a manager that comes to them and says, I got this artist I want you to sign. Well, it's going to cost that label, counting the production cost of the album, which includes paying the producer, which is usually, thank God, a hefty sum, and the marketing that goes into it, the advertising and marketing, and also videos. Videos are very expensive. Artist has to have a video. So roughly speaking, give or take $100,000 either way, it's going to cost them about $500,000 to say, yes, I want that artist. It costs them $0 to say, I've got to pass. So the first inclination, of course, is to pass because they don't want to spend the money unless this is somebody that just completely overwhelms them. And then if it overwhelms them, then you've got to go through a showcase. Yeah, they want to see you perform live. So there's rehearsal rooms in Nashville available to rent. And you bring the band in, whether it's their band or you hire session players to play for them, to showcase, and you invite a couple of labels that have shown interest and to see what they do on stage, okay? But The point I'm trying to make, so many times an artist will come in and just knock out a label. I mean, really say, wow. But you know that label is loaded. And it depends on the size of the label. I'll go back to when I was president of Playboy Records and started McGilly there. Had Bobby Borchers and a few other good acts. I think I had maybe 6 acts is all I had at any one time, because that's all my budget would afford. We were not like a huge major label. We were successful. We were voted the #1 independent label in Nashville for 2 or 3 years. But we were not like a MCA Universal, which I ended up being over there, Columbia Records, which became Sony, and Sony came in and bought a lot of the record companies out. Capitol, EMI, that was owned now by Sony. But they would have maybe, I don't know, it would vary, 20 to 30 artists on their roster. So they're going to have to say, man, my budget is full. I don't know if I can accept an artist. Okay, I really like this gal. I really like this guy. Really talented. All right. What am I going to do? Oh, gosh. I really want him, but I'm going to have to drop an act to be able to make a hole for the new one to come in. Now, who do I drop? Oh, okay. So-and-so's selling good. So-and-so's doing pretty good. I put a record out on so-and-so, and it didn't quite happen. Something happened along the way in the marketing or the promotion, but contractually it says that I've got to put out 3 more albums on him during this contract, or on her, whichever the case may be. So I can't legally drop them to add this other act. So I'm going to have to pass on this act. That's why I tell you that there's so many variables that I always felt like, as I sat down one day in my office on Music Row, 16th Avenue, and I was watching people walk up and down the street. A lot of them carrying a guitar, of course, because they were going to the next place to audition as a writer to a publishing company or to a record company to pursue a deal as a recording artist. And I would look at these people and I'd say, I haven't heard them. A lot of people haven't heard them. A lot of people will never have the chance to hear them, or that particular person will never have the opportunity to showcase their talent for that record label. And I'd sit there and I think, this is sad. There's something wrong with this story. What is the answer to this story? Heck, I didn't have it. I did not have it. Remember, I told you I had a very viable, very talked about, very hot label, but very small. When you're talking about a label that has half a dozen artists, 6, 8, whatever I had at the peak, opposed to a major label like Columbia RCA, Sony, Capitol, all those big labels, they could have 30, 40 acts, and they could absorb it. They had that kind of money. They had that kind of budgets to work with. But I looked at those people down there, and I'm thinking, no telling what they've done, what they've gone through to get to Nashville, to try to become a star, if not a star, to become successful in their own mind and utilize their talent that God gave them to write a song, to sing a song, to entertain a person. And I started a crusade there, not really a crusade, but a movement saying, hey, let's start showcasing some of these people. Let's pull them off the street. Let's try them. So we're obligated. There's another thing I'm getting back to. I've got to go back a little ways. I told you that perhaps a label could not drop an act to make room for another act because contractually they were obligated to do 1, 2, 3 more albums. A lot of times it would be better, since they had not struck on that first album and made a big success out of it, to go ahead and buy out what we called, in other words, pay the artist for the 2 or 3 albums that you owed them, let them go somewhere else, to another label perhaps. They could do better for them. But let them go. So there's other ways out of that some people chose to do, called a buyout. Some didn't. I remember many, many years ago, matter of fact, going back a long ways when I was doing Jerry Lee Lewis, he got sideways with Warner Elektra Records, Warner Brothers and Elektra, and they bought his contract out. He had I think he had 3 more albums at $250,000 advance per album. They gave him the money and said, go, get out of here. I don't want you anymore. You're too crazy, too wild. That was not because lack of talent. That was because there was no camaraderie and no friendship and no cooperation between the artist and the label, which comes up too. If I'm talking Greek to you, just stop me right now, but I'm trying to tell you, if you're wondering why you hear someone that you think, and you probably could be right, is better than what you hear on the radio, there are reasons why. And getting back again, it could be the personality that's when they meet with the label says, I don't really care for him. Maybe that particular girl, that particular man said one word that irritated the label head, and all of a sudden the label doesn't want him. No good. Forget the talent. Maybe politically he was aligned or she was aligned opposite from what the label was aligned. Oh, don't want him. Maybe politically right, not for us, not for right. And now they say, who are we going to get to book this act? So they have to find a booking agent. There's so many variables to getting into a record deal with a record label. More so, making the record a hit. You've got to get it on the radio. So the labels are thinking, let's call our promotion department. Let's play it for our promotion department. Let's see if they think they can get this on the radio. Oh, you can't get it on the radio? Then why should I sign the act? See, there's comes stupidity. That is stupid. And I have known so many stupid label heads. You're running a label. You're supposed to know music. Why should you call a committee in? That became another thing. Oh, God, that drove me nuts. They would call a committee in and have like 8 or 10 people vote, and they'd play them a whole album. What should be the next single on this act? They would get 6 or 8 people with different opinions. Hell, make your own opinion. You're running the damn label. You think that's a hit, put it out. Forget what anybody else says. You live on your own merits. If it's a flop, it's your fault. If it's a hit, you're a hero. Make the decision and do it. Go ahead and sign that guy off the street. Go listen to him. See if he's better than what you have. If he is, sign him. Give him a break. You won't go wrong. Trust me. More people out there without record deals today, as it was 30, 40 years ago. Give them a shot. Look them over real good. Make sure they have good management. Make sure there's a booking agent in place to get them work once the record's out, once the record's playing. Make sure that your promotion staff gets that record on the radio for the public to hear it and make their decision. If you have a promotion man that can't get that record on the radio, send him on down the road, would you? Yeah, pay him off, tell him get out of here. Bring somebody in that's good at radio that can get him on the radio. Let your acts be showcased. Give him a shot. Well, I guess I'm ranting or something. One thing I will mention to you, years ago, back in the 70s, Conway Twitty. He's gone now. Conway was a good friend of mine. I thought the world of Conway. Conway's a good man. But Conway, being a good father, wanted to give his children a shot because they all wanted to be like Dad. Well, there was only one Dad, Conway Twitty. But he got him record deals. He was big, and he was selling a lot of records on Decca Records. The guy that ran Decca Records was a guy that invented or founded Music Row. His name was Owen Bradley, another good friend of mine. Owen was a gentleman, and Conway went to him and said, Owen, I'm selling a lot of records for Decca. And he had like 20, 30 or more number one records. I don't know. He had more number one records than anyone until Toby Keith came along. So he said, how about signing my kids? They love to sing. Well, Owen being Owen and Conway being big, he gave Decca Records, which is a big, big company. He gave record deals to Michael Twitty. He gave record deals to Joni, who married a good friend of mine, by the way, later on. They're not married now. And he gave record deals to everybody but, Kathy, yes, Decca gave a record deal to Kathy. So there's 3 Conway's kids on Decca Records. Problem was, none of them were hit acts. None of them had that charisma. None of them could sing as good as their dad, but they had a record deal. So that took up 3 spaces that could have been filled by someone that could have a hit record. It's just, it just never ceased to amaze me. He had one child that didn't voice any interest in recording. Thank God, or they would have filled another hole. But it all worked out in the long run where Conway was Conway. Kids got deals. They filled up spaces. But there were other things that went involved. I'm not zeroing in on Conway, nor any of his children, because I love the kids. But there were other people that were influential, as Conway, that could get a friend a record deal, okay? And they didn't really need a record deal because they couldn't sing, but the friend did this, did that. Also, it was a thing with having too many artists. A label would get overloaded with artists. They couldn't take care of the ones they had. Well, I've kind of told you the rundown on what I felt and the things that I witnessed in Nashville, and that might put to rest to you in your mind when you hear somebody on the radio and he's not as good as someone else you know or some friend that sings good and is talented. And you say, I wonder why my friend can't get a deal. Wonder why my brother-in-law can't get a record deal. It's because of the things I just ran down for you. Not enough room for them, not enough foresight from the people that are running labels. You know, again, let me get off subject just a little bit again, but not off subject. The record companies in Nashville started years ago. It was run, every record company was run by a creative person, a person that had come out of the studio, either with musical talent, either with production talent. They could hear music. They knew music. Then all of a sudden, it started turning to a deal where, you know, Owen Bradley, great record guy, did all these wonderful things. Brenda Lee took her pop. Patsy Cline, I can't tell you everything Owen did. He just did a lot of great things. I'm singling in on him because I thought so much of him, and he did so much good for Nashville. But they just did not have the right people. They started bringing in lawyers, yes, attorneys, to run a record company, the creative part of a record company, the heart and soul, the meat of a record company was being run by lawyers, by accountants. Hell, they could hardly turn on a radio, much less make a decision as who was a good act, who was not a bad act. For example, you've heard of Toby Keith? I think you've heard of Toby Keith, one of the biggest stars in the history of country music. There's a story for you. His producer, a great producer, one with a track record that is really, really darn impressive. His name is Harold Shedd, and Harold was on one of our shows, last year, I guess, and he told this story, but I'm repeating this story in case you missed that particular podcast that we did with Harold Shedd. He was on this is the Toby Keith deal, okay? True story. Toby Keith had gone to Nashville from his home in Oklahoma twice, 3 times, I don't know, several times up there. He had been to every record company up there. He had been to every publishing company up there. All of them turned him down. They said, well, you know, we don't really like your voice. We don't really like the songs you write. I don't think you're just right for us. And Toby said, well, I guess I ought to go back to Oklahoma. And he came back to Oklahoma. Well, my friend Harold Shedd had produced all of Alabama's records. If you ever heard an Alabama record, he produced it, and he produced a lot of other acts too. And then he landed a job running Mercury Records, which was a major label in Nashville. And he's on an airplane. He's flying somewhere. And the flight attendant got wind, or suspected, or heard, that my friend Harold Shedd was somehow involved in the music business. Well, I guess he was. He produced all those hits. So this attendant kind of comes up to him and said, sorry, sir, but I don't want to bother you, but I've got a cassette here. And a friend of mine knows this guy, and he's really good. He plays the clubs around Norman, Oklahoma, and all around that part of Oklahoma. And there's some songs on here, some of his, and would you mind taking this cassette and listening to the songs? And Harold, of course, saying, well, of course I will. And he's a man of his word. He did. But we, as producers, were approached regularly with such a proposition. So nevertheless, he took that tape that had been turned down by every record executive in power in Nashville. Go home, boy. You're not good. These songs aren't any good. Come on, you can do better than that. You're in Nashville. You're going to have to compete to be here, you know. Well, Harold listened to those 5 songs that were on that cassette. They were demos. 4 of those 5 songs became #1 records in the nation. #1 the record, including I Should Have Been a Cowboy was on that tape. But Harold saw something in there that no one in Nashville saw because Harold, a record producer, that's what he did for a living. He knew how to make a record. And other people didn't. I was talking about the lawyers and these type of people. But the moral of that story is I think Toby had just about given up because Harold told me that they met for breakfast after the first meeting, and Toby said, I need some money. Well, he's going to get an advance if Harold signs him from the record company. Of course, that's normal. So Harold's not worried about the money. And he said, well, are you in a bind right now? He said, yeah, I'm in a bind. I'm behind on my house note, and I've got some other bills I need to pay. And Harold said, well, how much money would it take to take the pressure off of you right this minute? Not waiting for your advance from New York that's coming in from Mercury, the record company, but how much do you need right now? Toby said if I had $15,000, I'd be straight. Harold wrote him a check for $15,000, said, you can give it back to me out of your advance from the label when I sign you and give you a record deal, which he did. But I tell you that story to let you know that even Toby Keith was turned down so many times by so many idiots up there running record companies in Nashville, Tennessee. What happened after Harold signed him? He became a superstar. Oh, good grief. More stories like that are abounding in Nashville. Producers like myself, we had a battle, trust me. I'll give you one. Rick Blackburn was running Columbia Records, CBS, Epic, all one group, and he called me and said, would you take Billy Joe Shaver to do an album on him? I said, well, I like Billy Joe. He's crazy as I am. Hell yeah, I'll do that. So I did. I took him to Colorado to Caribou Ranch, which was an incredible facility up there. And how I got that kind of budget out of CBS, I don't know, but it's a huge recording budget. Brought back the album, okay. Again, Rick Blackburn, not a music guy, marketing guy, making decisions. Gave the tapes to him from the sessions, and he said, called me, he said, Kilroy, I am so disappointed in you. And I said, for what? Why did I disappoint you? I didn't mean to do it. And he said, I've always thought of you as one of the best song people that's ever been in Nashville, Tennessee. But there's not one hit song on this Billy Joe Shaver album. I said, Rick, with all due respect to you, my dear friend, you're missing one for sure, probably 3 or 4, but one for sure. He said, oh, yeah, which one is that? I said, it's a song called Old Chunk of Coal. He said, oh, that's a terrible song. That's not a hit. I said, Rick, put that record out on Billy Joe Shaver and you have a hit. No, we're not going to put it out. We're going to put the album out. Maybe radio will find something in there they like and we'll put that out. I said, hey, man, it's your show. You gave me the money. You paid me. I brought you the product. You do with it what you want. I'm just suggesting you put that hit song out called Old Chunk of Coal. He didn't put it out. 6 months later, John Anderson recorded it. You remember, I'm just an old chunk of gold, but I'm going to be a diamond someday. Billy Joe Shaver recorded it first. I produced it on him in Colorado, Caribou Ranch. But again, that was one of those songs that the marketing guy at Columbia Records said, oh, I know it's not a hit. Well, they didn't know crap. Hey, you know what? I've shared with you some of the irritating moments that I had in Nashville, which were few, let me say. They were few because I enjoyed every minute of being in the studio. I enjoyed being in the swimming pool with all the players in the world and the best players and the best writers and the best studios. I mean, you're in producer heaven when you were there. But in the meantime, I've got to tell you about something else that's important to me. Yep, that's Total Feeds, our sponsor. Total Feed, they make special feed for so many different species of animals. Now, you hear me talk about Total Equine a lot. That is because Liz and I were one of the first barns to go on total equine for our horses, and they just blossomed and everything. But after that, Dr. Harry Anderson, who came up with that formula, said, you know what, I've helped the equine world a lot. I'm going to turn and help the rest of the people and the rest of the animals. So he turned to a formula he created called Total Bull. And those bulls that you see on the PBR bucking and the bucking bulls at the NFR and the PRCA rodeos, many of them are on Total Bull. You look at the muscles on those bulls. Good grief, they're strong. It's all because of the feed. And then for the goat farmers, he came up with Total Goat. The goats start producing more meat, and they became beautiful goats. So all the goat farmers went on Total Goat. And he's got Total People, which someday I'm going to ask him, because I love Harry Anderson. Dr. Harry Anderson is so smart. I'm going to ask him one time about a cancer deal that he whipped, okay? He needs to share that secret. It's not really a secret. I don't think he shared it with anyone. He needs to, because that's as we all know, the disease of the devil is what I call cancer. But Total Feed, go to their website, totalfeed.com. Look over all of the different feeds that they have formulated for the different species of animals and for humans too. I mean, Total Human, don't forget that. You'll feel better for it. In the meantime, until next time, after you've gone and visited Dr. Harry Anderson's Total Feed website, come on back here to Kilroy's Total Fun. That's what I call it. It's Outlaws and Legends and Behind the Music. Share this with your friends, okay? You see a little share deal? Boop, hit it. Send it on, share it with your friends. We're trying to build this up where we can keep people informed on what I saw and what happened in the decades that I was in Nashville, Tennessee. In the meantime, God bless each and every one of you. Don't ride with a wet saddle blanket unless it's on the horse. Adios.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Kilroy's Outlaws and Legends Behind the Music. If you have any thoughts or questions about the content, email them. Kilroy Outlaws and Legends, all one word, at yahoo.com. That's Kilroy, no S, Outlaws and Legends, all one word, at yahoo.com. And don't forget to subscribe. Third-party use of any part of this podcast without the expressed consent of Eddie Kilroy is prohibited. The Kilroy's Outlaws and Legends Behind the Music podcast is a production of Eddie Kilroy.